Good evening, TDN listeners. Good evening, my audience. So this week in interview, welcome. This is the 20th episode of the 12th season of This Week in Interview. Welcome. I hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far, and I hope you continue after this program to have a great week. As I said, this time on a Wednesday at 8 p.m. is the highlight of my week. I look forward to spending the hour or so that we spend together every Wednesday night on This Week in Interview. So welcome especially to my regular listeners, those of you who make This Week in Interview a regular part of your weekly schedule, your weekly agenda. Thank you for that. And if tonight is the first time that you're listening to This Week in Interview, I want to tell you welcome, a very special welcome to you. I hope you like what you hear so much that you too become a regular listener to This Week in Interview. On This Week in Interview, we handle topics, contemporary topics. We try to bring it to you from a different perspective. I like to think that you, the audience of This Week in Interview, are the best informed audience that in our zone. Because if what we do, you can find it by just clicking your remote or your mouse, then there's no need for us. So we do personalities sometimes, we do topics, we do contemporary topics, we do stuff on your health, we do politics, we do economics, we do everything that we think is important to making you a whole individual. And tonight is no exception. On the 26th of July, the government of Dominica presented its annual fiscal budget for the year 2022 to 2023. And I thought it would be interesting. I thought that most of you would be interested in dissecting that budget somewhat and understanding and looking at it from maybe slightly different lenses. What does it mean? What does the budget signal? What does it signify? What does it say about the priorities of the government? And so I invited my good friend. He hasn't been on with us in a while. We allow him to spread his wings. He's been on several of the other social media platforms, and we hear him, and he's doing a good job of it. And so I decided to invite him back for tonight's discussion. My friend Alvin Thomas. He is a very thorough guy and skilled at analysis, skilled at audits, and so I think he was the perfect person to come on and discuss with me the nuances, the highlights, the lowlights of the budget that was presented by the Labour Party government in Dominica. Supposedly that should guide the management of the country's resources for the upcoming fiscal year. And so you're in for a treat, a very, very in-depth and very eye-opening discussion. So I'm not going to take a long time in this intro. As I said, Alvin's been on with me several times, although we pick up new listeners all the time. So if you haven't heard him before, you're going to enjoy what you hear tonight. And I'm going to jump right into doing the Caricom Anthem. And when I come back, I'm going to introduce you to this wonderful gentleman, Alvin Thomas, and we're going to launch into the presentation, the budget that was presented by the government of Dominica to the people of Dominica in Parliament on July 26th. So let us do the Caricom Anthem now, and we'll be right back.
From many distant lands, our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caricom. Though great and diverse be our ethnicities, the bonds that unite us are stronger than these. We die, we pray, we love, we dance and we play. We relate to each other, the West Indian way. Today as a people united, determined and steadfast we stand. We look to a brand new horizon, the future now firmly in our hands. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caricom. Hele, hele, guavo, open you sing Caricom. Leve, leve, guau, naki you drum Caricom. Tabu ya tabu, guavo, open you sing Caricom. Leve, leve, guau. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caricom. Hele, hele, guavo, open your sing Caricom. Leve, leve, guau, hele, hele, tabu ya tabu, guau, naki your drum Caricom. Leve, leve, guau.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to this week in interview. Those of you in Dominica listening to us on RVR Jams on DigiPlay channel 59, welcome to you. Listeners, I always ask you, viewers, to share, invite somebody to listen to this week in interview, because the information that we have, the more people that hear it, is the more informed you're going to be, the greater the chances that we're going to really have a movement, a meaningful movement. And tonight is no exception. The more people who can join us is the better understanding they're going to have of the budget. The government presented a 59-page document. And so most of us don't have the time to read 59 pages and to really dig into it and to pull out the little nuggets in there and to analyze it. And so we decided that we're going to do that for you. So invite 5 people. Tell them this week in interview is on, and we are discussing and dissecting the budget that was presented by the government on last week on the 26th of July. Yeah. So the budget was presented by the Prime Minister to Parliament, and the theme that he used was rising above challenges, seeing beyond the horizon, embracing all opportunities to deliver dynamic Dominica. It sounds like a new party, a new government asking for, trying to inspire you to see your aspirations into the future. So coming from a government that's been in power since 2000 in Dominica, constantly asking you to look to the future for development. But I don't want to color the discussion too early. So I have a guest, a very learned and analytical and experienced gentleman in the name of Alvin Thomas. He's my guest tonight on this weekend interview. And so we're going to be discussing the budget. Alvin was a trade unionist for a long time, many years in civil service in Dominica at various positions, including administrative positions, permanent secretary, postmaster general, and so on. So I think he's well placed to have this discussion. So I want to introduce you to Alvin. Alvin, while you haven't been on this weekend interview, so welcome. And before I forget, I know you have a birthday coming up, so I'm going to wish you happy birthday, young man. Happy birthday. I wouldn't say when it is. I will not even say how young you're going to be, but all the same, I wish you many, 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 many more healthy and happy years to come, my brother.
Thank you. I appreciate
as we get beyond working every day for other folks, and we can really sit down and have the time to enjoy life. I wish you that period, an extended period in that phase, with good health and clear mind.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
very much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
But it's awesome. It's awesome to have you on tonight.
Well, Tony, yes, it's always a pleasure to come on board. How can I refuse? How I can say no to you? I mean, they say sometimes as you get older, you have to learn to say no, because as I'm now in my retirement mode, I sometimes find myself having more to deal with than when I was fully employed. But how can I say no to someone like you?
I don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't tell you.
But certainly it's a pleasure to be back on this weekend interview on TDN Radio, TDN Live, and to say a pleasant good evening to all your many listeners and fans of that program, both in the diaspora and back home in Dominica. I always consider it a very humble privilege to be able to share some of my knowledge, some of what I know with my fellow Dominicans and friends of Dominica. I think Dominica at the moment is at a crossroad, and that is something we can discuss at various levels. But certainly we are at a crossroad as a young nation. 6 years from now, we're in the year 2022, 6 years from now, which is 20, whatever that is, do the maths.
28.
Dominica will be a 50-year-old nation, half a century. 50 years as a nation, as a young nation that gained independence back in 1978. And I guess the question that remains for those of us who are concerned about our country is, what have we achieved over the last 50 years? And how do we position ourselves as a people, as a country, for the next 50 years? So we are at a crossroad, and I'm always pleased to, as I said, to be here. So
yeah,
I'm happy.
and it's always a pleasure to have the discussions with you. As you said, we are 6 years away from the grand old 50-year-old as a country. And folks might compare that and say, well, that makes us a relatively young nation. However, I disagree because of the size of the country, because of the size of the economy. Um, less than 10 secondary schools, maybe a little bit more primary schools, maybe less than 100 miles of road, one hospital. What else? What else? You know, just
Yeah,
just we should be really nimble
exactly.
and flexible. And so 50 years should be more than enough to
Exactly.
start to see results in our aspirations. But I was reading the theme of the
And
budget, as I
Tony,
said.
and
Mhm.
Tony, if I may just interject here,
Uh-huh.
we are saying so within the context of the budget too,
Yes.
because the budget, as we will go into in a few moments, is a planning object, a planning device, a strategy in terms of where and what you want to do for a country. So that 50 years that we're talking about should not be seen outside of context of the budget, but within the overall framework of development, which invariably is tied in with your annual budgets or your plans, your master plan, the plans that you have for your country.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to. I was going to. I was because the theme of the budget talks about embracing all opportunities to deliver a dynamic Dominica, seeing beyond the horizon. So, and I like how we frame it. This is the budget of a country that has been independent for the last, if we go in, 6 years brings us to 44 years. 44 years. So, and Dominica, the population of Dominica is a young population. So there probably is a majority of Dominicans alive who know Dominica as an independent state. And the budget, as you say, highlights the areas where the government thinks that resources should be allocated, and it also points towards the vision that the government has for the country and the priorities. And so I'm going to just ask you, first of all, Alvin, before we narrow down and dive into one or two or three specific areas. You have had a chance to look at the budget. You've had a chance to make some notes and to analyze it. What was your general reaction, your general impression of the budget for the fiscal year 2022-2023?
All right, Tony. Let me begin first of all by I'm just referencing the last budget, which was the 2021-2022 budget, because as we will discuss this evening, for context, we and continuity, you got to somewhat relate the two. Now, last year's budget, the theme was, if I may share, was a dynamic Dominica, building on our past, solidifying our present, securing our future. That was the theme. Dynamic Dominica. That was for 2021, 2022. Dynamic Dominica, building on our past. We just said we've been here for the last 44 years as an independent nation, solidifying our present. Here we are today. Securing our future. That was the theme. And the theme this year you just introduced, you just mentioned, rising above the challenges, seeing beyond the horizon, embracing all opportunities to deliver dynamic Dominica. So the word dynamic is there again. So you understand why, in some respect, we have to relate the two. Let me begin first of all, even before I give my general impression of the budget, for purposes of our listeners, because the budget as presented can seen and be interpreted as something abstract to the average Dominican. Oh, the guys in the parliament talking and saying your stuff, that I can't relate to that.
That is politics.
You're right.
Mhm.
So think of it this way. All of you on the program listening tonight, I would think most of us create what is called a budget. We go to work, we have a job, we get a certain amount of income coming out of the job every month, and we devise a budget. We know we got to pay so much towards our cable bill, so much towards our electricity, our mortgage is another $1,000, our car note is so much, our bank loan is so much, our credit card is so much. So you create that budget, and your grocery bills, your services, goods and services, and you may have, in terms of a mortgage, you would consider that would be considered in for purposes of the government like a capital expenditure. So you have a house or you have a car. The same will apply to a business. So you have that budget. So you create a budget. And of course, your budget is based primarily on your income. Okay? You can very well bring in an income of $1,000 and then you have a budget of $1,500. Or your income is $1,200 and your budget is $2,000 a month. Something can be wrong. And for all intent and purposes, if you were to go to the bank would say to you, well, hey, your debt to income ratio is not good. You have more debt than income, and therefore you're not a good candidate to lend to you. The same applies in government. In a government context, on the income side would be your taxes, the revenue that the government derives from their taxes, their licenses, their various sources of revenue. When you go to the registry and you get a birth certificate, you pay for that. Stamp revenue, levy at the port, you name it, custom duties, VAT. And right now, as we will see later on, and we'll discuss in some detail, the economic citizenship program. So that's your revenue side. And then on your expenditure side, of course, you have your regular expenditure, payments to the public sector employees, your salaries and wages, your goods and services, your office supplies, you name it. And similarly, like in an individual case, you have capital projects. So you have the roads, a hospital, capital projects of that nature, where you have those various capital projects. And those capital projects are again funded from your revenue.
Right.
Your revenue is, as well as what one would call loans. So government would borrow loans from other friendly governments or institutions and grants. So on the capital side of the budget, it's referred to as a public sector investment program, PSIP. And that is made up of three major areas: the revenue part, the loans part, the grants part. And that is what you use to finance your capital project. So that is, in a nutshell, is a budget. And obviously, they are elected on our behalf to do the things for our country. Now, in terms of your revenue as a country, in an individual case, you work for an employer, so they pay you. You exchange your labor for a wage. Or in a business, you sell a product or service, and that's where your revenue comes in.
Revenue comes from, right?
In the case of the government now, you have to obtain your revenue from your taxes and other sources. So by and large, the role of the government is to stimulate the economy, to make the economy buoyant, to make the economy attractive, so that all the other players within the economy, and in particular the private sector, would be engaged in what one would call job creation. You create the environment, you create jobs. So people are able to work, they have jobs, now they can spend. They'll pay their taxes, obviously. They will be able to go to the bank and get a loan. The construction industry will boom. They'll be able to go down to Simsy and go out on a Friday night. So they have a job. They're working. And you as a government role now, your role is to facilitate that to happen in the economy. Put in place the necessary infrastructure and to facilitate the economy being stimulated for that purpose. When I look at this budget, just in a nutshell,
Mhm.
that budget does none of that. Absolutely zero. So that is why I'm not sure what that theme means, rising above the challenge and seeing beyond the horizon and embracing opportunity. That's just talk. In that particular budget that we're looking at, the 2020 to 2023 budget, the word jobs, Jobs, is mentioned no more than 4 times. 5 for the max. No more than 4 times. 5 for the max. The word job creation is mentioned only once in the budget on page 31. The no mention made of the private sector. Zero. Somewhere I believe where they spoke of this new housing scheme or project for young people. No, I'm sorry. Where they spoke about some levy they're going to implement for abandoned properties in Roseau. And they say they have the support of the DIC in as far as that initiative is concerned. But outside of that, there is nowhere in the budget where reference is made to the role of the private sector and to what extent that government will partner with the private sector, will create the enabling environment for the private sector, whereby to create jobs for young people and for people in Dominica, for that horizon we're talking about.
So let me jump in here and say, okay, so we talk about where the government gets its money from. And you said generally, mostly it should. If everything was working properly, most of the government revenue should come from taxes and issuing licenses. So stuff that's associated with the generation of economic activity. So you get up, you go to work, you get your salary, you pay income tax. A business goes into business, they sell goods and services, they pay a tax. You want to operate a business, you need a license, you pay a fee. So ideally,
processing, manufacturing.
right, ideally a government is supposed to create the environment where there's enough of that activity going on, so that if they when they charge a percent of tax or fee or whatever, it's going to be sufficient to meet the expenses that the government has to meet in terms of salaries for civil servants, roads, and those things. Absent of that, the government now has to go to raise money. So they raise money with loans, and because of our past as colonies, we qualify for grant money, and so that should augment the government. There are some countries that have resources like minerals and natural resources, oil, and so on. And so, if they can exploit that from a public sector point of view, they can get some royalties or something from the sale. And so that is equivalent to, let's say, the CBI program, the passport sales program, where that is it generates revenue and it can help augment and offset some of the tax burden that the government can place on the people. So let's talk. I don't know if you have the numbers where we can break down what percentage of the various. If you have it, I'm not. Do you have it?
Sure.
Yeah. If we can break down where the government anticipates getting its money from, what percentage of it is taxes, what percentage of it is which would reflect what the government expects to have in terms of economic activity.
Yeah, let me even while we do that, and that's an excellent area to segue into. Let me just say, and you mentioned it for purposes.
So recurring expenses on page 22 of the budget. I don't know if you have it open.
Yeah, I have it right there. But let me even before we do that, let's go to the recurrent revenue. I think it is on page
recurrent revenues on page 22.
Yes. But even before we go there, Tony, let's let me just, for purposes of the audience, share some information with them, because
Okay.
you mentioned the word economic citizenship, and it appears to be the main source of revenue for the government,
Right.
which in my view and in the view of many other persons, economists and otherwise, believe that is not sustainable. That's not sustainable. Unlike when we were during our banana era, where we had a product, a produce generating income for the country, or when we may have had cocoa, coffee, you name it, bay oil, the economic citizenship is not as sustainable. Now, in 2021, the Auditor General report revealed that 32% of the country's revenue, 32% came from the economic citizenship program. 32%. 34% came from taxes on domestic goods and consumption. Another 15% came from taxes on international trade, 11% on income tax. 11%. So that tells you the number of persons of two things. One, either there's nobody working to pay income tax, or if people are paying, then there's no collections of that income tax. And 8% of the revenue. That was for the financial year ending 30th of June 2020. For the financial year ending 30th of June 2021, which is and by the way, let me just say for the 2020, the total recurrent revenue was a little over 578 million, 578, 307, 330. And out of that 578 figure, 32% of that was economic citizenship. For the financial year ending 30th June 2021, where their total recurrent revenue was a little over 800 million, 812 million, 989, 252. 55% represented economic citizenship. So more than half of their revenue came from the economic citizenship program. Yes, but here's the best one. 21% was for taxes on domestic goods and consumption. Remember, I told you the year before that, taxes on goods and consumption was 34%. So it went down to 21%. For taxes on international trade, 9%. It went down from 15%. Income tax, 7%. It went down from 11%. And licenses, which would fall under other revenues, 3%. Now, they will be quick to jump and say, well, it was COVID year, COVID, we did not think everything. It's either COVID, Mario, Erica, something to blame. But the point I'm making here is that is not sustainable. And similarly, as you will see from the current budget, I trying to get the exact wording that was used, because well over $500 million is earmarked to come from the
CBI
program, the CBI. So clearly, as you will all agree, that budget is not geared towards job creation or stimulating of the economy. It's not. It is merely geared at some folks selling our passports, 90% of which the people, they don't even care or worry about Dominica. They just want to have a Dominican passport to facilitate their travels wherever they want to travel. And this, to my mind, is the approach that the government has taken in presenting this budget.
So, Alvin, let's dwell on that a little bit so people can understand what you're saying, right? You spoke about the banana industry or the cocoa or whatever it is, or we spoke about if a country has oil or minerals. In those kind of industry, jobs are created.
That's right.
So when you're producing bananas, you have jobs being created. You're mining minerals, you're refining oil, you have jobs being created. with the CBI program, you don't have jobs being created to sell passports. You
That's
have a
right.
few agents who are residing outside of Dominica, and they sell some passports and they send the money back to Dominica. So really and truly, when we show the revenue that is earned by the country and we put it in our GDP or whatever it is, it doesn't tell
It is false.
a true story because it suggests. So if you look and you say, okay, oh boy, the revenue for the country increased, but it increased with the sale of passports being the largest share of how it increased, but that activity does not generate any income in the
That's
country.
right. That's right.
And so unlike agriculture where you hire somebody to help you harvest bananas, the person gets paid, they go in the shop, they buy something, the shopkeeper gets something, he goes down, he buys wholesale, the wholesaler has employees and so on. That as you said, that scheme, that arrangement is not sustainable. And,
Right.
and you're saying that in the current budget, it is projected to have what, 55% of the revenue?
Yeah, at least 50 something percent of that. I'm just trying to get the exact number for you. And that cannot be sustainable. It is not, Tony, because it's what one might consider a false type of income. Again, it's like when you go to the bank as an individual, okay? You go to the bank for a loan. The bank will ask you, well, what's your income? How much money you making? And you might say, well, I'm making X amount. In the case of a woman, they might ask her, are you getting any alimony or child support or overtime? Now, although the bank may consider that, but that is not going to be the driving factor to enable you to be credit worthy. The bank
Right.
is going to depend on your income that you get as a worker. The same with the government. They're depending on that CBI, which is like alimony or child support or overtime. And that is not true revenue from a productive sector. And that is why I began by saying that the budget in no way addresses the question of job creation, which is something you would get if, say, for example, you can stimulate the economy. So there is agro-processing, there is manufacturing. Take, for example, the water that we have as a resource. If we're able to do something with our water and bulk ship it or do something with it where we become the water producer of the world, that I can understand. And what is even more concerning as it relates to the economic citizenship program is the fact that this program, not just in respect of Dominica, but worldwide, is at threat. United States currently, as we speak, have legislations in tabled legislation in the House of Representatives to clamp down on the way in which countries are giving those citizenships. The EU just last year and introduced similar legislation to clamp down. So it is not sustainable.
It is not, and also it is not within our control.
Exactly.
It is almost completely dependent on external forces.
That's
And I
right.
mean, and if we look at the number of passports that have been sold over the years, we're going to run out of new customers for passports soon. I am surprised we haven't run out of passports. But I mean, I don't want to turn the discussion too much into a discussion of the CBI program.
Okay.
I think that the point that you make is valid. That the size or the proportion of the revenue that is targeted to come from the CBI program is not sustainable.
Right.
And also the projected revenue from taxes and from people doing business in the country is shrinking.
Right.
So therefore, it seems to be a budget that is projecting a shrinkage of the economic activity in the country.
Certainly. And but also if we may just dive maybe in some a little more other specific areas. Let's look at the elephant in the room. And you know what that is, the elephant in the room? The international airport. That's the elephant in the room. Okay.
What does the budget say about the international airport?
You really want me to tell you, Tony?
So, Alvin, you know what? It's 8:40. Let me take a quick break, get a
All
word
right.
from the sponsors, because
All
I
right.
suspect that discussion is going to go for a while. Let's take a break, get from our sponsors, and we're right back. We're going to hear what the budget has in it about the international airport. Stay tuned, listeners.
Presented by
If you live in Canada, the US, and the UK and are looking for Dominica products including cocoa sticks, bay rum, coffee, soaps, crafts, and other popular Dominica items, then look no further. You can now shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, a secure, easy-to-navigate website selling a wide variety of Dominica-made and Dominica-inspired products. When you shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, you are helping to grow Dominica's economy. Go to BuyDominicaOnline.com and enjoy home away from home.
People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
Welcome back, listeners. Thank you for staying with us through the break. This is the 12th season, 20th episode in the 12th season of This Week in Interview. And tonight we're discussing the budget, the fiscal budget for the year 2022-2023 as presented by the government of Dominica in Parliament during the last week of July 26th. And my guest with me that I have talking about the budget is Mr. Alvin Thomas, doing an excellent job of showing us, of highlighting the threats. As a country, we have to look at opportunities. We have to look at things that threaten us. And besides natural disasters like hurricanes and volcanoes and those kind of things, how sound is the plan that the government has to manage the resources of the country? It has to come into play. For the fiscal year 2022-2023, the government is proposing total revenues of $1.13 billion. And the current revenue that we have been discussing is $896 million. And that includes the CBI program, which is a chunk of that. I think over 500 million of that is from the CBI program, 530, I think. You have local capital revenue, which is 5.1, receipts from loans at 77 million, grant resources in the sum of 155 million. But as part of the capital expenditure, so Alvin, before the break, we said we were going to talk about the international airport. How much of the budget, how much of the capital budget has the government allocated to the international airport?
Well, let me see if I can find that answer for you. And when I find it, we may have to have another program, because the direct answer to that is it's not reflected in the budget.
The budget has no amount for the international airport.
No. All the budget has in there is saying we're going to build an airport for you. But there is no cost attached to that, which, you know, it's Tony, it's kind of insulting, as I said, because again, I always try as best as I can to, when we're discussing matters like that, to bring it home where the listeners can relate to it. Think of it that way. You go into the bank to build a house, which is, as I said, can be a capital expenditure for an individual. And you're going to build this 5-bedroom, 3-bedroom house, and you don't have a cost to it. I mean, you don't have a cause to share anybody to say, well, Tony, by building a house, it's going to cost me $250,000, boy. Or you go to the bank. Listen to what was said in the last budget, which is the 2021-2022, on the matter of the airport on page 4. Construction of our international airport has begun. That was said in 2021-2022. Construction, and that, Mr. Speaker, to achieve dynamic Dominica, to achieve resilient Dominica, there are some key matters that must be addressed. No one can deny that air access has been a critical issue that has held back the pace of our development. We are now on the cusp of revolutionizing life and business in Dominica. Construction of our international airport has begun. And this is a major game changer for Dominica. The international airport will be the impetus for further diversification, transformation, and expansion of our economy. And I'm honored to lead the thrust to even more prosperous days for our people and our country. Mr. Speaker, there is no denying that the global landscape is challenging, that the task at hand is not easy. And it goes on to talk about what the airport is going to result for Dominica. That was in last budget.
That was the last budget.
That was the
how
last.
How much money was allocated in the last budget?
There was no indication as to cost in the budget.
Okay.
Nothing to say, well, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, this is going to be in the tune of $2.5 million or $400 million or whatever it is. Funds for the airport, to build the airport, is going to come a combination of loans, grants, and from our resources. Nothing like that. Zero, Tony. Zero. Now, how can you tell me that you're undertaking a major infrastructure development of that nature on behalf of the people, and you cannot say to the people what is going to cost them? What is going to cost them? I mean, let me share with you what this current budget has as it relates to the airport. Let me just go back a little to the 2020-2021 on page 34. And that's the last budget we're looking at. We're not on the current yet. On June 9, 2021, and that's for last budget, this government set in motion the fulfillment of a promise made to the people of this beloved country by the Dominica Labour Party. Government has acquired land and went on and on to say, and that things are in motion and the airport is being built. They have begun.
Right. They've begun. They've already started. Yeah.
In this current budget, on page 15 of the 2022-2023 budget, it says, Mr. Speaker, last year we commenced work on government top priority project, the international airport. Although still in a relative early stage, there are visible signs of a positive impact on the people of Wesley and Woodford Hill area. After a vigorous tender process, I'm happy to announce that. Oh, let me just go back there a while, because I think that's important. Let me go back there. In last budget, the 2020-2021, on behalf of the government of the government and all Dominicans, I wish to extend thanks to the people of Wesley, Woodford Hill, and Palm Tree for their continued cooperation and support, and for their contribution to the national development. We also express our gratitude to Montreal Management Consultants for partnering with the government and the people of Dominica to develop this dream project. So they're saying in their last budget that MMC was the one engaged to do the airport. You would recall that there was this big hula in the Windsor Park for that purpose, signing a contract and all that kind of nonsense that was going on. But on page 15 now, after a very vigorous tender process, I'm happy to announce that China Railway Number 5 Engineering Group Company, CR5, have been selected as the main contractor for the construction of the international airport. CR5 is a reputable firm with extensive experience and successful track records in the execution of major transport projects, including subways, and railway lines, roads, and airports in the Caribbean.
So did you, Alvin, did you see that tendering process?
No.
It was a rigorous tender process.
That's what it's, and also, even in this current budget, no reference is made, Tony, to the cost of the project.
So how would you go to tender if you had no cost?
Exactly, that is the point. And if you are presenting a budget of that nature, you have to be able to indicate that for the purposes of that project, this is where the funds are going to come from. Granted, like every other project, as you know, as someone who have done projects before, there may be some variables. So you might say, well, the airport is going to cost us $500 million. But in the end, it may cost less, it may cost a little more. But you need to give us, the people, some indication to say, well, this is what a major infrastructure investment like that is going to cost us. Because guess what? If you have to borrow to build the airport, although somewhere I believe in the last budget they said that would come from the economic citizenship monies, it's going to impact your national debt in relation to your gross domestic product. Now look at if we go back a little to 2017, in 2017 our national debt in relation to domestic product, our debt to GDP ratio in 2017 was 80.24%. In 2018, it went up to 84.63%. In 2019, it went up to 94.23%. In 2020, it went up to 107.33%. In 2021, it dropped a little to 101.9%. And in 2022, what we are in now, it's already at 99.69%.
And it's important to point out that that percentage is a percentage of an increasing number.
Exactly.
So when it was 80%, it was 80% of maybe $600 million.
Exactly.
Now it is 90% of $1 billion.
Exactly.
So not only is the percentage increasing, it's an increasing percentage on a bigger number. So how is it, Alvin, that at the same time that we're seeing the revenue from the CBI program is increasing, we're also seeing an increase in the debt? So I guess what I'm saying is that if the CBI program is bringing in, and I want to bring it down to layman's terms, if the CBI program is bringing in $500 million into Dominica, but we're still borrowing $200 million, that is $700 million. So where in Dominica are we spending $700 million on one hospital, 10 secondary schools, maybe 15 primary schools, less than 100 miles of road? Where are we spending $700 million year after year after year? Dominica is only so large. Where is that money going? That is the problem. That is the question that baffles me every time I hear a budget in Dominica is $1 billion. In my mind, if you spend $1 billion in Dominica 3 years in a row, you shouldn't have anything else to do in the country.
That is a very, very, very pertinent question. And that points to the question of the management of that money. You have heard, like myself, like many of our listeners here tonight, that the bulk of that money is not being managed in keeping with the finance regulations and the fact that those monies, all of the monies that is, need to be deposited in the consolidated fund. So you're absolutely right in asking that question. You know, I mean, where
are you spending the money? I mean, I was looking at the government has a table, as to where they are expecting to spend money, how they're going to allocate the expenses.
What area of the budget are you looking at? Just from
the recurrent expenditure by ministry
On what
/
page?
department. It's on page 21. Thereabout.
okay, 21, yes.
I converted it to a Word document, so
Oh,
some of the
okay,
people,
okay.
but it should be in that same.
Yeah.
There's a table there.
Yeah,
The
recurrent
table 2
expenditure. Yeah, I'm on there.
by
I see.
ministry by department, right? What I did was I rearranged that table in order of percentage of the expenditure, because to me that gives an idea of the priorities of the government. If we have $1,000, what we spend the most money on, we assume that's what is going to within restrictions, because we know we have debt to service, we have civil servants to pay, and so on. So not surprisingly, the Ministry of Finance has, say, 40% of that expenditure, because it's explained that includes debt servicing, it includes the payment of civil servants, and so on. So the Ministry of Finance has 40%. So 40% of the recurring revenue is towards debt servicing and that sort of thing.
Right.
Next in line is public works.
Yeah.
No. Next in line is education. 12% of the budget is education. So we dropped from 40% to 12%. 12% is towards education, human resources, planning, vocational training, national excellence. We cannot knock that if it is well spent, is money invested in the people. The next one is public works and digital economy, which is 10%.
Yeah.
If you want to jump in on any one of those things, you can
No.
jump in on any one of those.
Okay? You're right. So far, you're doing good. Yeah.
Then the next one, number four. Number 4 is national security and home affairs. I don't believe that is housing. No, because housing is lower down.
Come there. No.
National security and home affairs features number 4. What exactly is our national security?
Well, it's
what's
the
involved?
national security that we have is the police. I mean, there's no other way of putting it.
But security against what?
Well, that's a good question. Are we now becoming a police state? Because in the last budget, last year's or the last 2021-2022 budget, the amount that was allocated for national security was 54.7 million, which represented 8.4% of the overall recurrent expenditure. That was for 2021-2022. And that has been increased to 61 million, almost well over $6.4 million more recurring.
But Alvin, what exactly, and that's recurring.
Yeah,
so that's not capital. That's not building police stations or the Coast Guard or any of those things.
No. That's recurrent.
So where in Dominica are we spending $60 million on national security?
That's a good question to ask. That's a very pertinent question to ask. Are we now, as has been alluded to, becoming a police state? So is that intention to hire more manpower for national security, buy more guns, supplies and material, get more tear gas, supplies and material? All of that will reflect as a recurrent expenditure. Capital expenditure.
Yeah. To bring it more into perspective, right? We like to think that Dominica is a peaceful state. Okay. Health and wellness is also at $60 million. So we're spending the same amount of money on national security as we're spending on health in the country. You would think that Dominica is sitting in the middle of enemies, like we are the state of Israel or Iraq or any one of those places where our neighbors are constantly trying to invade us and attack us, and in an environment where we're spending $60 million on national security and home affairs, we are already at murder number one in the country.
And look at this. Let me just share some more information there as we're there on the recurrent expenditure. And again, as I indicated earlier, I'm comparing to the last budget because there has to be some continuity.
Right.
It can't stand on its own. The last budget under elections, which is another critical area we need to look at, because as you know, there is this current discussion as it relates to electoral reform. And that's where the Electoral Commission will come in. How much money is made available to put in place what needs to be done insofar as it relates to electoral reform? In the 2021-2022, $2.7 million, which represented 0.4% of the budget. This year, they allocated 2.5 million, 0.4. So they have reduced that amount by 200,000.
Which means that they don't expect any change in
Exactly.
in the electoral process.
Exactly. So clearly, they're saying, well, we don't think there's going to be a need for that much
for any money, anything more than we spent on elections
in the last year.
Yeah, than the last year.
Let's look at another line area on the one that says environment, and we know what's happening with our
rivers and
environment, rural modernization, and Kalinago upliftment. Last year, they had a total of $9.3 million in the 2021-2022, which represented 1.4%. This year, they allocated 8.1 million. So they decreased it by $1.2 million. So
environment, rural modernization, yes, and it's
reduced by $1.2 million. Let's look at another line item.
So I will again put it in context. If we're spending $60 million on the police and national security, we can only get $8 million to upgrade. There is not the full $8 million because it is shared in environment, rural modernization, and Kalinago uplifting.
Well,
$8 million to share among those three critical areas, but we can spend $60 million on national security.
And basically what they did, Tony, again, let's translate that to a individual's budget. It's like you saying, you know what? I'm not going to spend $300 a month on food. I will spend $250 on food, and the other $50 I'm going to spend on alcohol or cigarettes or entertainment. Okay? That's what it boils down to. Let's look at another area again. Sports, culture, and community development. Sports. Bear in mind the number of playing fields that young people don't have anymore to go to play. Last budget, they allocated $13.5 million, which represented 2.1%. This year, they allocated $12.4 million. They reduced it by $1.1 million. Well over $1 million was reduced for sports, community development. Let's look at another area, another very good area. Planning, economic development, climate resilience, sustainable development, and renewable energy. Last year, they budgeted for that area $4.6 million, which represented 0.7% of the budget. This year, they allocated $2.9 million. They dropped it by $1.7 million.
Let's hear the topic again, Planning.
Economic affairs.
Planning. Because we know that one of the reasons why Hurricane Maria was so devastating is because a lot of our work, construction work and so on, was not done to standards. And so we can assume that there is a need to improve standards and to focus on standards. And also, if we're looking to do more trade with the world, we have to increase our ability to produce stuff and establish standards. And so the government is saying that they only need $3 million to do that.
Yeah.
In a budget of $650 million.
Yeah.
They only need $3 million.
And they are reducing that amount from what it was last time to this time around by $1.7 million. They're saying, well, we don't need all that money. Which was too much last year, so we're reducing it. But guess what? They've taken all the savings from that and put it on national security.
To the national security.
Let's look at another area. The last area.
So Alvin, is it that the government is expecting an increase in crime, an increase in in violence, and therefore they have to invest more in the forces that they hope that has to work with that in that environment.
Well, that's a very interesting question to raise, Tony. The question I would ask would be, what is the justification to increase the allocation to national security by as much as $6.4 million?
And you're reducing so many of the others by $1 million.
I mean,
That's exactly where the savings went.
What is it that is so crucial that we have to increase what we had last year by as much as $6.4 million? I mean, what is happening as far as national security is concerned? Are you putting in place, making sure you have a police state in place? Or, I mean, I don't know.
But those are fair questions, because if we say if we analyze the allocation of the budget to indicate the priorities of the government, we have no choice but to come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable conclusion to arrive at. You know, I mean, what is the justification? I mean, to increase? Is it that you believe you need more police officers? Because we don't have a military, we don't have an army. So, I mean, what is it that warrants a $6.4 million increase in recurrent expenditure for national security?
And that doesn't include the construction of police stations and so on. I'm repeating that because we saw some time ago the condition of the police station in St. Joseph, when some of the policemen leaked a video out that was showing the horrible conditions. We saw when they arrested Dr. Thompson Fontaine, the condition of the cells that they hold people in at the police headquarters.
Yeah, that has nothing. That's not capital expenditure.
And that's what I'm saying. That is not part of that expenditure.
Yeah.
So you would think that if they were going to spend money on that, they would spend money on the infrastructure, and we would see that increase in the capital budget, not in the recurring budget. The recurring budget is to buy ammunition and guns and pay police salaries.
And your policemen, increase the police numbers from 200 to 300 or whatever that may be. I don't know. That is where your recurrent expenditure would go. But clearly,
listeners, this is what, and viewers, this is what we're talking about. If you have a copy of the budget, I'll probably post a copy up on my page. On page 21, you can get that table. I reorganize it in order of largest to smallest, and you will see the stark difference in terms of where the government plans to spend to spend money.
And Tony, there is one other area which I want for us to touch, because later on we will see where somewhere in the budget, towards the end of the budget, he makes reference to the fact that these are social programs that his government has put in place for the last 2 decades. The next line item we can look at has to do with youth development and empowerment, youth at risk, gender affairs, seniors security, and Dominicans with disability. Last budget, they budgeted $19.4 million, which represented 3.0% towards recurrent expenditure. This year, they budgeted $18.2 million, which represented 2.8%. So a drop of $1.2 million. So they're saying for this year, we don't need as much money for recurrent expenditure for that area, youth development and the rest of it. So we're going to reduce that amount by $1.2 million.
Tourism, international transport and maritime initiative, $17 million. Housing and urban development.
Yeah.
$3.8 million.
Yeah. So even by just looking at the recurrent on the face of it, clearly tells you that budget is not geared towards stimulating the economy
or towards improving the quality of life in that
creation.
Yeah.
Yes, it is heavily biased towards social projects, and I'm not sure even that in itself, to what extent that too is well integrated or in any sustainable fashion. But clearly that budget doesn't take into account where the world is today post COVID-19 and where we need to go within the next 3, 4, 5 years as a nation. Just 6 years shy from our 50th year as an independent nation.
Exactly. Alvin, I just drawing a comparison here. Okay, there's a line item called it has to do with international business. I just had it here.
Yeah, it's the Foreign Affairs, International Business, and
Foreign Affairs, International. Okay, so nobody's denying that those are important ministries. Foreign Affairs, in particular,
that was dropped too. It was dropped by a couple of
I know, but if you have to compare, take that line item to the one with the Kalinago.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You're allocating $19.4 million to foreign affairs, international business. How much international business does Dominica do? And diaspora relation. And this is recurring. So that is payment of staff and so on and so on. And if we compare that to the 8.1 million for our environment, if we say that our whole development is predicated on Dominica as a nature isle, ecotourism, or water, the environment is the most important aspect that we need to preserve.
Right.
The modernization of our rural community, whatever that means, but definitely need of the Kalinago people. If we can almost take that line for line and compare it to foreign affairs, international business, and diaspora relations, and the budget is 8 million for what we would perceive would be the more important aspects of our country, compared to 19 million. Those numbers definitely could easily be switched, and the country would not suffer from that.
And nowhere in the budget, if I recall, nowhere in the budget was any specific reference made for that particular line items in terms of what the government's intentions are.
Yeah.
The word diaspora is mentioned only in two instances only in the budget. At the beginning of the page when he introduced the first line of the budget, and somewhere later down where he spoke about the housing development for young people, made reference to the fact that persons in the diaspora can also benefit from getting applying for the houses. So
and you know, Alvin, in terms of the environment, we know how important that is. We see the need for environmental impact assessments to be made on major projects, because we see any unintended consequences where we saw washout into the Emerald Pool, we see washout into Titu Gorge, we see there's an excavator sitting in the middle of Lai River, and all of those things we saw dumping on the riverbanks. So there definitely needs to be an investment in the policing of our environment and the development of standards and enforcement of our environmental laws.
Right.
So that is super crucial. And we're seeing a drop in that funding. And that is, and I have this ordered, this is number 12.
Yeah.
This item is number 12 on the list of priorities. I have them ordered in terms of value. Number 12, as compared to all these other things that we're talking about that's higher up.
But even
national security is number 4.
Yeah. Even tourism. Let's look at tourism, which is supposed to be I would say a pillar for economy.
Right.
Last budget, this is the 2021-2022. They allocated let me try and get the figures here for you. They allocated 18.1 million, 2.8% towards tourism, International Transport and Maritime Initiative. This year they reduced it by a little less than $1 million. They allocated 17.3 million, which is 2.7% towards tourism.
So at this stage, do we think that this budget truly reflects the thinking and the priorities of the government, or that this budget was just hastily put together and folks just put numbers on there to make up numbers. And as the year goes around, they move numbers from one ministry to the next, so the budget doesn't really reflect the true expenditure.
Exactly.
Because because that I cannot believe that those would be the priorities that, as the budget is reflecting, that is the priorities that the government would have, taking Dominica as it is right now.
You are absolutely right on that, Tony. You are absolutely right. And there is no thought process going into this thing. It's just one of those other regrettable way of politicking, of make me feel good kind of thing, with those themes that we saw earlier, and giving the impression that something is being done, but nothing is being done. The question that you just raised in the 2021 Auditor General report for last year, it reported that for the period ending June 30th, 2021, it is reported that a supplementary appropriate act was approved by Parliament for fiscal year ending 30th June 2021 in the amount, and that would have been for the 2021-2022 budget, in the amount of 275,150,327. Now,
so that number again, Alvin.
let me
And explain what that is.
let me do this. Contingency fund warrant. The purpose of the contingency fund warrant is to defray unforeseen expenses which have not been provided for by the Appropriation Act relating to that year, and where the circumstances are such that the expenditure cannot, without injury to the public interest, be postponed until provision is made by Parliament. Funds received during the fiscal year through grants or loan to undertake projects and programs would require the use of a CFW, which is a contingencies fund warrant, to facilitate spending. So basically what it is, they will go to Parliament, they will put these numbers there, and these numbers means nothing, and then they turn around later on, 6 months from then or whatever, and they request a contingency fund warrant. And for that financial year ending June 30th, 2021, they requested a warrant in the amount of $275,150,327. The number of contingency fund warrant for the year under review was 81. Listen.
81 times they are unforeseen.
Contingency fund advance warrant for the year under review, and they're referring here to the year 30th June 2021, was 81, an increase from the previous year number of 57. So for the financial year ended 30th June 2020, they had 57. For the financial year ended 30th June 2021, they had 81. Okay? The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development yielded the highest in number with 27 warrants issued, and the highest in value of warrant in the amount of $79,212,000.
Now, to put it in context, the budget for that year was what it was. The recurring budget for that year was $600 and something million.
I don't have the 2021.
But the 2023
2021 goes, part of the 2021 goes into 2022. So for all intent and purposes, that would have been the budget covering the period July 1st, 2020 to June 31st, 2021.
Okay, so the question, the reason I was going there is because the recurring budget for this fiscal year is $650 million. The years you're talking about, it would have been lower, I believe.
Yeah.
But even if it were at $600 million.
or even five.
We're talking about
The principal,
$270 million
which might have been
contingency,
a third.
which is like 40%. If you're doing an estimate on a job, usually your contingency is 10% or 15% if it's high. Sometimes depending on the numbers, it goes to 5%, 7%.
Mhm,
We're saying that the government, after running the affairs of the country for 20 years,
mhm,
is 40% off what they estimate it would
mhm,
cost to run the country.
mhm,
So they either have bad data, they're not
mhm,
taking notes, or they have no idea what they're doing.
mhm. Of course, that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is, Tony. You know, I mean, you have another. I mean, there's so many. One other area that is mentioned in the report on the budget, sorry, on page 34, speaks
Mhm.
of $3.8 million towards the national abattoir. Now we know what's going on in the abattoir. I would just say, for the benefit of our listeners who may be able to get a copy of their hands on the Auditor General's report for the year ending June 30th, 2021, there is a 24 pages indictment on the manner in which the abattoir is being run. The number one issue as it relates to the abattoir is that there is currently no as far as the governance of the abattoir, no legislations or regulations currently governing the management of the institution. Lack of hygiene and environmental legislative framework. But in their budget, they're saying they're allocating $3.8 million and speaking so glowingly about what they're going to do and not do with the abattoir. But if you read as recent as 30th June 2021 of the Auditor's General Report, you will find there are 24 pages indicating serious deficiencies and irregularities as it relates to the management and the governance of the abattoir.
I think it's 9:23, so I'm going to beg him that we go to 9:30. So we're about 7 more minutes. What I mean, this is just a comedy of errors. We could go on until midnight talking about this, but in 7 minutes, let's talk about agriculture. I don't know if you have any notes on agriculture. We can just go back to the table. If the government is serious about agriculture, what is the indication? I will tell you that agriculture. Where do they have agriculture? In the table, housing, planning. Where's agriculture? Wow.
They have it under the blue and green economy. They got
Blue and green economy, agriculture, and food. $8.2 million.
And
The
guess
amount of
what?
field
Again,
roads.
Tony, without interrupting you.
Mm.
Last budget they had 8.6 million, which represented 1.3. This year they have 8.2. So they've dropped the amount again.
So in other words, the farmer and the farming public and the food production sector they should not expect anything different from what happened last year in agriculture. And I wonder how many people would say that what the government did in agriculture last year was satisfactory, so that they can just do the same thing again.
Tony, that's just lip service. Basically, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just lip service. It's nothing.
Blue and green economy,
Yeah.
agriculture, and national food security, and they have it as 1.3% of the budget.
Yeah.
1.3% of the budget.
And so if you take between agriculture and tourism, those two productive, one might say, sectors or sectors that would drive your economy. If you take the two together, you're looking at
3%, 4%, 2.7, and 1.3,
yeah,
4%.
Exactly. So that in itself substantiates the fact that the budget is not designed or geared towards job creation or making
stimulating the economy or anything like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure if later on when at the appropriate time when the reporting on the taxes are shown, you will see what type of taxes that is received by way of taxes on domestic goods and consumption. Because there's no consumption. No consumption.
Yeah, there's no money
That's what drives
to
an
exercise
economy.
anything. Yeah,
I mean,
right.
economists know that. That's what drives the economy, consumption. It happens right here in the United States. People have jobs, they go, they spend. They'll take a credit card, they'll spend credit card, they'll spend cash, they go to restaurants, they go to, the stores, they'll shop. Consumption. And in turn, government will get whatever taxes on that. People are working,
Right.
pay their taxes and stuff like that. I will admit, I will agree that, yeah, they're the vulnerables in our society that you have to cater for. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying you should not do that as a government. But by and large, I believe a budget should reflect to what extent that you as a government is putting in place the necessary infrastructure and creating the right environment so that business can flourish and the economy can thrive. I mean, we
Yeah.
saw when Ross was in Portsmouth, the kind of impact that was having on the economy in terms of people who were renting apartments, people who had bars, who had shops, who had restaurants, dry cleaning.
Farmers would sell their produce and so on. Yeah.
Yes. So it's just sad where we are as a nation. And I think what I will end by saying, Tony, is that I think bad things, they say, happen when good people do nothing. I think it's not only right to do something, but when you do not do, that is when evil thrive. So that is why I think it is necessary for more persons to say something, do something for our country. Let me reference on page 45 of the budget, page 45. The area is captioned Pillar 3, and it speaks of investment in citizens' well-being. And I'm going to reference the second paragraph of the budget. Over the past 2 decades, a decade is 10 years here, so we're talking 20 years. That's the Prime Minister speaking, okay? Over the past 2 decades, we have implemented a slate of programs to support and protect the elderly, provide equal education opportunities for young people, grant incentives for micro, small, medium, and large businesses, provide extensive financial and technical support to farmers and other producers, introduce numerous tax relief measures, upgrade main and community road across the country, ensure access to new modern health and health facilities, improve and upgrade sports facilities. All of these, along with the many other measures implemented by this government, have positively impacted the way of life of every citizen of this country, unquote. Clearly, when one reads that, you see herein lies a government that is giving someone a fish as against teaching them to fish. Nowhere in that statement it was said that over the past 2 decades, this government was able to generate and create so many jobs, was able to make individuals self-sufficient, where you as an individual can earn your way. You have a job, you can go to work and earn a living, and you can choose whatever home you want based on your circumstances. Clearly, what he's saying here, for the last 20 years, you've made this a completely social, hand me, give me type of environment. Can't sustain like that as a young nation. We cannot. You teach a man to fish as against giving him a fish. And that is what this budget is all about. There's no indication, as I said earlier, there's no reference there in any shape or form to job creation. Nowhere in the budget it says, well, based on the initiatives that we have taken, this will enable or create X amount of jobs within such and such a period. Nowhere in the budget reference is made to the role of the private sector, that the private sector has been engaged or anything. One other area, even on the tourism, there's somewhere in the budget they made reference of 400 something room and 5-star hotels and all this nonsense. Where is the support for our indigenous hoteliers? The Evergreen, the Castaways, the Galway.
Anchorage, and yeah, all these things that no longer exist. Postmore
And these were the hotels that sustained the economy in days gone by. When the economy was flourishing, we were not all the way there like the other islands as far as tourism is concerned, based on our product. But they were there. Farmers were selling their bananas. We had, bellows. We had different things taking place, So clearly that budget doesn't recognize the need to make it an enabling economy for young people. Even this housing project that the government is getting into. I mean, why would you want to go in that route? I mean, many young persons, including myself, before I migrated, bought land in Wallhouse, Castle Comfort. I mean, think of all those areas in Dominica where young civil servants, private sector people, number of people were able to work, earn, and build their homes. They did it in Castle Comfort. I mean, look what Castle Comfort is today. Look what Wallhouse is today. Look what Checkall is today. Look what Cadeville is today. I mean, you walk all over the country, You go down Salisbury, down that side there, all those places, young persons were able to work, earn a salary, go to the bank, get a loan, and build a house and take care of their families. But today, the government is saying, "No, we'll give you a house. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. We'll provide that. We'll do this." It can't work like that. And they're doing that on the premise that they will continue to get money from a CBI program. That is not sustainable. So it is my hope, as I said, that those of us, that good people, will do something, will sit back and say nothing. I know this budget can be somewhat intimidating to some folks. They look at it, boy, I'm not involved in that. And so, but it would be interesting, though, to just maybe do a survey around the country and ask the question, have you listened to the budget? Does it have an impact on you? Just to kind of get a sense as to where people are thinking. Might be a very interesting exercise to undertake. So that's what I would say. And again, just to thank you, Tony, for allowing me to share some of my knowledge with your guests. It's always a pleasure to be there, and I look forward to coming again.
Tremendous conversation. Thank you so much, Alvin. Your level of analysis and the way in which you so eloquently express it is above, definitely above the fray, but in a way that it's relatable to everybody. I want to say good night to everybody who's on. There's a few of you who said good night. Dee is always there. Sophie, Eliza, Derek, and Didi again. I know I can only see you if you make comments. But on average, when I get the reports for the week, our program touches about 7,000 people on average in a 7-day period. So Alvin, this is going to get some airplay. Some people are going to learn, and that was the idea behind inviting you on. I know there's another report that's floating around, which you made reference to briefly, which is the auditor's report of the fiscal activity of the government, the expenditure, and the accounts of the government. So I may invite you back on for us to talk about that, which the budget is what we planned. The audit statement says what they actually did.
Right, exactly.
And how they did it. So that would be an interesting conversation.
And not only that, it shows up all the irregularities that occurred.
As I say, how they did it, what they did, and how they did it, and whether they're following the rules or not. And so we have that report. We've been going over it, and we'll bring that in shortly for listeners. So thank you again, and it's your birthday week, so happy birthday again.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best. I admire what you do. I've been seeing you on all the other platforms, sharing your knowledge, and that is good. That is good because we need that, because so many of those institutions in Dominica has been weakened.
Oh, yeah.
And so they need folks like you to fill that vacuum and to fill that void, and to try to provide some of that information and some of that perspective that is no longer available, because what we see is what they know, and we need to tell them that that is not good enough. There is better that's available. And so once again, I want to tell you good night, and listeners. I want to say thank you for tuning in. And we'll do this again next week, Wednesday. In the meantime, stay safe. There are a lot of these health challenges around. Avoid it as much as you can. Continue to exercise, good hygiene, and be prudent and smart in what you do and what you partake in. I want all of you to stay safe. So have a good night. Alvin, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Tony. All the best. No problem.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.